So I think what I'm going to do is actually try to do a logical extrapolation and conclusion to the symposium today. And what I'd like to do is draw on both what David was talking about and what John was talking about, and try to pull together a couple of threads. Because remember what Dave Ferrucci was talking about was about Watson and deep inferential question answering systems, what that's like. And one of the things that I find so interesting is that it's not given to you on a silver platter. The world of information is out there. We're all doing our best to try to make it better and much more interesting and much richer and give you ocarinas on the dime. But you still have to think about how do you frame your questions. You have to know what GIS does for you, how you can ask questions. And that's really what the gist of this is all about. What do you need to know? Why do you still need to think? Why can't I just type in the dumb question to Google and get the answer back? Why can't I type in the dumb question to Watson and get the answer back? What I'm going to say applies to all of this stuff. So let's start off by thinking, what do you really need to know to be a good searcher? And I mean this largely. I mean, what do you need to know to be a good researcher, to be a good parent, to be a good teacher, to be a good consumer? I like this word informant. You are informant if you know how to deal with knowledge, if you know how to deal with information by back formation from literate or from numerate. How do you know what information is and what you can do with it? Do you know how to use a blob of information in hand-to-hand combat? Do you know what it means to get object recognition data under your fingernails? Is it enough for you to be able to just type a few words into Google? Because I know what you do. I really do. You type in 2 or 3 words and expect us to read your mind. And we're really good. We're not that good. We haven't yet shipped the mind-reading module. The best programmers are working on it, but we can't quite get into your particular Umwelt, your particular set of expectations about the world, and all of your particularities. Let me give you a couple of examples to illustrate what I mean. Has anybody seen this island? Anybody happen to know what it is? Well, it's a real island. It's not from the Pirates of the Caribbean. It is a real island in the South Pacific. Now, I will tell you that some really interesting insects live on that island. So here's a question you might have, right? Where is it? Anybody know? No, you don't know where it is. I know you don't know where it is. If you read my blog, though, you know. A very large insect lives there, and it's a very particular insect. In adult form, it's about yay big. I'm not kidding. It's about that big, about a foot long. Okay? The question is, how big is it when it emerges from its egg case? Right? So these are questions you might have. Say you're a 7th grader and you're interested in science, etymology. So how do you find this stuff out? Well, here's one way you can do it. If you know, well, let me take a quick question poll here. How many of you know how to search by image on Google? Okay, I would say roughly a quarter of you, maybe a third, we'll say 30%, because the rest of you are being shy. What you can do, though, is drag that image of the island into the image search box in Google, and it will return a set of results, a set of images, and the best matching result it can find. So in this case, you can read off the snippet. This is Ball's Island. You can click through on the Wikipedia page and see what Wikipedia actually calls it Ball's Pyramid. It's the same thing. You can actually discover it's 1,800 feet high, and it's near Lord Howe Island Group. Fantastic. You've just gone from nothing, knowing zero about this magical place, to knowing a lot about it. Well, this is a video that I found of this insect. And the question is, how big is it when it emerges from the egg, right? There is nobody has written about this. So what you can do is take a frame of the video like I did here, and measure one egg case diameter, because I know what that is. It's 2.1 millimeters. Okay? So I make a little yellow bar there, and I copy in Photoshop. Copy. I've got a egg case length unit measure, and I can tell you exactly how long that insect is after it emerges from an egg case. The remarkable thing is that's about 10 seconds after it came out of the egg case. How it folds up inside that egg is a mystery. That's a really interesting thing. I encourage you to go watch the video. Let me give you another example, and I think this characterizes the sort of information space we're working with now. David Pogue's excited by mobile phones. I'm excited by being able to do things that used to be impossible. Used to be literally impossible. Here's a question I posed to a bunch of people, which is, this is a picture taken from an office building somewhere in the world. What's the phone number of that office? The cool thing is you can figure it out. Okay? So how would you do it? Well, given an image like this, you can actually, for example, go look at those buildings. You can zoom in on the logos on top of the buildings. You see the flag in the lower left corner? That's an Egyptian flag. It's irrelevant. It's actually advertising. So this is not in Egypt. But once you look at the logos on top of the building and type those logo names in, you can discover these are all Polish companies. This is downtown Warsaw. Okay, what's the phone number? How do you do that? Well, it's a little hard to see in this image here, but if you look on my blog, you'll see there's a little blue blurb in the middle of it. You take that image and reverse it, and you can see it's the Google logo. Aha! It's the Google building. Well, it's actually at the Warsaw Financial Center, at Emily Plotter in Warsaw. The phone number is that, and it's taken on the 10th floor. How do I know that? Because I used Google Earth and I flew to that location. And then using Google Earth, I turned around and looked at the building. And you can see in the window. That's cool GIS, right? It works because a lot of people have spent a lot of time to make 3D models of everything. And they make them with a high degree of accuracy. And so that building right there, the TP building, Telefonica Polska building, is not done by Google. Somebody else did that for us. This is crowdsourcing writ large. This is crowdsourcing of reality. I can fly to this position, turn around, and look in the window from whence that picture was taken. So what's interesting, I think, about the new world of information as we're entering it now, is that there's, as I was saying earlier, not just a little bit of stuff out there. There are entirely new conventions, new media, new genre, new kinds being created constantly. Everybody knows, I assume, what MMORPG is, right? Okay, massive multiplayer online reality role-playing games, right? Yeah, the rest of you gotta go look that up. Right. But what I find interesting is that these new genres come and go very, very quickly. And a lot of us don't know about genres like that one I just mentioned, or about spoof sites like that. Have you ever heard of a spoof site? How many people know about the dihydrogen monoxide site? A couple of you. Okay, the rest of you need to go look that up, right? So let me show you one. This is one I really like. All the librarians will recognize this. The Endangered Northwest Tree Octopus website. I'm telling you now, it's all fake. Just so you don't get confused. There is no such thing, but it's a beautiful site. They've done a fantastic job of spoofing information-based websites. There's a copyright notice, there's a phone number to call, there's people to contact, there are newspaper reviews, etc., right? It's beautiful. If you're in the 6th grade, you will be totally taken in by this. My 4th grade daughter came home from school with an assignment that said, write a report about the Northwest Tree Octopus. It was serious. So you got to understand that sites like this exist, and it's just an entire genre. Now, I assume you also know the language of tweeticons and emoticons, Twitter, and all this stuff, right? You know what all those emoticons signify, right? Okay. You know there's acronyms like rolling on the floor laughing, and all those key ideas and concepts like metadata, filters, and so on. And if you don't, David Pogue mentioned the intelligent device divide. This is a more fundamental divide, I will argue, between those who can search and swim in the waters of information and those who are going to drown, or those who can't even stick their foot into the water. So here's a great example of this. This was from an unnamed QA site. Is it true that Rosa Parks would have moved to the back of the bus, but she was listening to her iPod? So this person is trying to do a project for her school, and the first answer is, yeah, it's true. The reply of the asker is, thank you, I'll put that in my report. Okay? What this person asking the question on the site did not realize is what that emoticon means. That is a universal symbol for sarcasm. Right? It's someone sticking their tongue out. If you don't know that language, you're screwed. I mean, it's true, right? You just don't understand it. You're not speaking the lingua franca. Right? So this motion from the impossible to the trivial, from the impossible to the instant, is a fundamental change as we go forward. This is a photograph that was taken by my office mate at work. And the question is, where is this? No. Good guess, though. Good guess. So if you do the same trick, search by image, drag it into the Google image box, it will tell you it's a Red Rock Canyon just outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, the inside story is when we first did this, Simon did this and dragged it into his search image box, and we saw it. And he discovered that his copyright was being infringed by multiple people on the net. And so he contacted them, did the takedown thing. It's very handy to find out. Try to do that 2 years ago. Good luck. Right? Key point. For those of you who didn't know you could do this, I have just given you unparalleled power. Haven't I? This will continue to happen. So I assume you, as you saw in the language translation thing, I assume you all know that Google has this fantastic translation capability where we do a lot of the languages, including things like Icelandic and Japanese. And so a little story, I like this singer, but I don't speak Japanese. She doesn't speak English as far as I can tell, but I wanted to read her website. So I typed in her name as best I could guess it, Tsuji Ayano, and look what happens. Look what happens. It says, did you mean Tsuji Ayano? And it is spell corrected my English, translated to Japanese, translated back to English. That's an interesting round trip for a spell correction in a non-Roman language. Right? So, in fact, you end up on her site and you get it translated automatically, and I now have a lot of her songs on my music player. This is a great trick when I also look up somebody like a South African player who cites in Afrikaans, and it just says, would you like to translate the page? I now can read Afrikaans. I may not be able to write poetry in Afrikaans, but I can understand what this musician is doing. I can understand what the Greeks think about the Euro crisis. I don't have to rely on the intermediation of other news sources who may not read Greek, or at least they can use the same translation system I'm using. Now, here's the interesting thing. I go around and I teach a lot of classes. Last year I taught around 100 classes to people on how to search. And what I'm really teaching is not the particular details of how to use Google search. I do that too. But I'm really trying to teach them a way to think. A way to think critically, a way to think analytically, a way to think about problems that escape the boundaries of what they already know. And that's the hardest thing. So I gave this problem to 250 Googlers, people you think would know how to search. Okay? None of them got it. The question is actually fairly simple. It is, this picture of this house is at 900 University Avenue in downtown Palo Alto. I want an aerial image of that house taken before 1977. That's it. How many of you know how to solve it? Oh, come on. You know how to solve it. I know you do. Okay? All my GIS people left? You know how to solve it? Yeah, okay. I would say 2 out of you, 2 people out of this entire audience know how to solve it. Well, this is better than Google, right? Well, nobody figured out how to solve it. The answer is actually fairly straightforward if you know what's possible. If you don't, you're stuck. I mean, there's nothing for you to do. The answer you should have known is Google Earth, which has this beautiful time slider, so you can actually go back and look at archival aerial imagery. You see the red arrow up there points to September 1948, which is presumably before 1977. And you can look at the yellow arrow and get this beautiful aerial photograph of that house. Okay? I've solved the problem. I've taught you another important, impossible skill. All of the world has pretty much archival imagery, some better than other places. But nevertheless, now you know how to do before and afters. You know how to go and look at the history of time. You can look, for example, at the expansion of Denver and see what's happened over the past 50 years. An important point I teach my classes is knowing what's possible to do relies on you knowing, well, not to put too fine a point on it, knowing what's possible. So, for example, you can scoop in fairly easily all of the WikiLeaks data and then visualize it, in this case, in using fusion tables. Very simple to geolocate all those events. It took about, I would say, maybe an hour to do that. The people who read this article, who do this data analysis, have a deeper, richer understanding of the world and become more informed. They become better able to negotiate what's going on in the world. Now, there's a flip side to this. Is this real or is this faked? Real? Remember, people remember this blackout? Faked, people? Okay, we're getting that half and half with a third of you not voting. Okay, I would claim it's fake. There's no clouds in this image. Oh, you can argue, yeah, it's an ultra-infrared spectrum. No, it's not. Right. There are too many artifacts in this image. This is completely photoshopped. Okay? So, here's the key point. We need to be able to not only be informant and be able to dig deeply into this information to answer questions like this. Where was Margarita Zella arrested? Anybody happen to know?
Paris.
What hotel was she arrested at? I want the address, man. I don't want the city. But that's good. That's, yeah, she was, this is Monahari. And she was arrested in Paris at the something hotel. Now here's what's interesting. I gave this to a bunch of readers on my blog, and they took on average about 12 minutes to solve it. Now here's the killer. If you spent more than 20 minutes, a quarter of those people got it wrong. This is generally true. The longer you spend on these problems, the higher the error rate goes up. So what this means to me is that skill goes along with accuracy and precision. Real? Raise your hand. Fake? Raise your hand. Okay? So again, a third of the audience is not voting. Okay? This is a totally real fish, first characterized in 1926. You can find this out. Now, here's the really interesting thing about this. I use this as an example in my credibility classes, where I go and teach people how to assess the authoritativeness of sites they find. And I get about a 50-50 split. Half say yes, it's fake. Half say no, it's not. Okay? And I let them work on this for a little bit, give this as a problem. And if you just typed in the name blobfish, you would immediately find the original article in the Journal of Ichthyology. But people don't do the one additional search required. I taught 5 classes of 50 people each, 250 librarians and teachers in LA. And I asked at the end of each class, how many of you Googled me? Answer, 0. What are they thinking? What are they doing? Do one additional search. Understand your information a bit more deeply, because every man should have a built-in crap detector. That's Hemingway's terminology, not mine. But the essence is actually right. You have to be skeptical about all this stuff. So one thing to keep in mind, it's not just that there's a lot of stuff, and it's not that there's a lot of spoof material out there, but there are entire compendiums of stuff that are online. And furthermore, the rate of additional content is increasing. The second order derivative is increasing. Okay? It's not just that there's a Library of Congress every day, but soon there will be multiple libraries of Congresses added every day. So what do you need to know? Well, clearly you need to know a few search strategy, how to decompose a problem, how to think about these problems. You also need to know what kind of information is available. If you don't know that particular kind of data is out there, it's very hard to think about how to ask for it. Right? It's a chicken and egg problem. Or rather, it's a dinosaur and avian fowl problem, a bird problem. Right? You need to know what kind of stuff is out there, what kinds of things you can do with that, like with the Google Earth example, and how to take information from multiple sources and combine it in interesting ways. So here's my charge to you going forward into the future. We need to develop the meta skills to explore the information spaces that are coming online. And you can't do it today and stop. You need to keep doing this. I'm sorry, it's true for the rest of your life, basically. Furthermore, you have to constantly learn new capabilities. You know what data is there, what information is out there. Now, what can you do with it? Can you visualize it? Can you lay it as a KML layer on top of Google Earth and do something interesting with that? Finally, you need to think about what you really need, what you really need to understand, how to navigate yourself from need to insight. So that's my hope for you, hope for us, hope for this conference, is that we'll develop that level of meta skill, that level of insight into our knowledge spaces, and we'll all be smarter and richer in the information future. Thank you.
We have a couple of quick questions. Everybody want to ask them over dessert? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that people don't put enough words in the search, and that's why you don't get the results. But sometimes, if you do put too much words, you don't get the results that you want. So, I mean, your future prediction was for us to kind of trick Google so that we get the search results that we want instead of, I think a better way of doing it is Google learning how the searches are going on and then trying to give us what we want based on what we give it.
Okay, let me repeat the question for the cameras. First, you said put fewer, put longer words in. It's a problem with the number of words in the query. Second, why doesn't Google just read my mind? And truthfully, we actually are trying to do that. We're trying to use more and more information about what you've done. That's why we're doing search personalization. Because if you talk to me every day for the past year about, say, structural concrete, and your next query is the word cement, I know what you're talking about. Right? Okay, so there's a huge amount of context in reality that we all share. But it's very difficult to share with a web app. That's one thing. Second thing is, I did not say, or if I did say, I misspoke, do not use long queries for your search queries. Long numbers of, what is the total number of iguanas in the state of, Quintana Roo in Mexico? I mean, don't do that. When you have very long query terms, very long numbers of terms in your queries, then you end up getting off topic and all kinds of bad things happen. So my general advice is actually keep it fairly short, keep it on topic.
But I mean, in the future, I can see where, that can be actually more information that the search engine can use to give us better results rather than, taking each word and, trying to search, on words.
So the reply comment is, but natural language is going to save us. And probably at some point, it'll get there, kind of like the same way that voice reco was always 20 years in the future until just recently, now it's really here. That was really quite good. Yes, at some point we'll do that. One of the things that we've noticed, though, is that there's a really interesting behavioral split in people. Young kids love to type in long questions. Literally, number 2, period. What is the diameter of the Earth, question mark? That's literally the query we get, because that was the second question on the form. True, this is true. And yet, as you get older, because of the way Google's worked in the past, we've emphasized shorter queries and done a lot of work on that. So will people love to type in long-form queries in the future? I don't know. That's a very natural modality when you're trying to talk to your computer. You're trying to say to Google, so what is the best movie playing tonight? Okay. So stay tuned. I mean, that's one of the points of this talk. This stuff will change. You have to pay attention. Question?
So I'm really interested to know, do you think that the advances in technology like this how is that going to impact our ability to think? Because as you pointed out examples of younger generation typing in a question letter for letter and then probably writing down the answer, what are the use of these complex tools requiring that we develop more cognitive abilities, or are we going to shrink in mental capacity?
Well, we were actually talking about this at lunch. The fundamental question is will the improvements in technology and computational capability reduce or improve or change our ability to think? Okay. Yes and no. How's that? And the thing to realize, every change in technology has a concomitant change in the way we think. Every single one. So, for example, the example I gave at lunch was Socrates complained bitterly about the introduction of the technology known as writing. Hated it. Thought it was a terrible idea. Plato, the student, wrote down, Socrates thinks this is a bad idea. That was 300 BC. Okay? And he was right. He was right. Having writing allows you to do later reference, which is a great capability, but it also demotes the status of memorization. Right? If you were a classical scholar back in 400 BC, you memorized vast reams of stuff. You no longer have to do that. Right? So this is a really interesting argument. The introduction of printing made the cost of owning a library much, much less, which was great, except now we've got thousands of books to deal with, right? So we have information overflow. Ann Harris wrote a fantastic book called The Problem of Information Overload in the 15th Century, which illustrates the scope of the problem. So yes, it will change our thinking. No, it will not necessarily be bad. Will it be different? Yes. Okay. One last one back. That's you.
In a recent article of the ACM, there's an article about a different kind of search engine that's more old-fashioned. It's like key network of knowledgeable people. So something like the cross between Knoll and Google search or something like that. Is Google looking at anything like that?
So the question is, what about using some notion of social search? We actually acquired a company called Bark, and which was very much like this. It was the ability to post a question, Twitter-esque like question, you could basically write it in, and it would then redistribute it to friends and friends' events and so on. And that had it got up to a kind of a certain size, and then didn't sort of seem to go much farther than that. On the other hand, I think a really important aspect of people who are good searchers is they have a great social network that they can tap into. Right? All of the people, I've interviewed a lot of people, and when I've interviewed what I call the ultra searchers, the people who are very experienced and do more than 100 searches a day, they all have a vast repertoire, a vast Rolodex. Oh, younger people contact list. They all have a vast Rolodex of people they can call in. So if somebody asks them a question about, I need to control my nematodes in Central California rice fields, what do I do? They know they don't know about that, they call the right person who will then give them the right keyword or the right beginning point. That's an important skill. Okay? So just because you've got a great search engine does not demote the value of your friends at all. It amplifies it.